Good afternoon. This is Paul Johnson with Film Obsessive, and I'm here today with filmmaker Elan Golod. And I'd like to congratulate him on the success of his new documentary film, Nathan-ism, which recently screened at Hot Docs and at Toronto International Film Festival. And for readers who aren't yet familiar with the film, Elan, can I just ask you to tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. So the film is about an elderly outsider artist named Nathan who, as a young man, was one of the few Jewish American soldiers to guard the Nazis at the Nuremberg trials. And that experience sort of fueled his creative output for the rest of his life. He created a lot of drawings based on those experiences. And I ended up following him for the last 4 years of his life.
For the last 4 years. Okay. Now that your film is completed and it's out in front of audiences, what do you feel like you've learned from Nathan Helu, your subject, and from his artwork?
Um, I think I learned a bit about, or I mean, I learned about the relationship between historical truth versus, personal truth, and that those things should be in relationship to each other. You can't focus strictly on what we learn in the history books. The oral histories are just as important and should be used together with archival research, and those should all be um, part of the study of history.
This was a pretty complex undertaking as it turned out. I'm just curious about how long did it take you to bring Nathanism to fruition, like from your first meeting with Nathan to the film's eventual completion?
So up until now, it's been about an 8-year long journey. I first came across this Nathan's story, and I read an article about him after he had had a small retrospective at Hebrew Union College Museum, and that was about early 2015. And I got his information and cold called him, and at first he was a little paranoid, didn't quite understand what I wanted from him, but I I was able to gain his trust and, you know, show him that I really wanted to showcase his full story. And we became friends, and, I started filming him on average once a week, and that ended up being uh, a 4-year long process of filming him. And then I continued editing the film over the following 4 years while I was working on some other projects as well.
Wow. Um, Nathan is really a fascinating artist. I mean, it seems to me when I watch him in your film, he's almost compulsed to create. Anytime he seems troubled, he reaches for that Sharpie. And it's really a primary means of how he expresses himself. But there was a moment in your documentary that it seemed like it took on a dimension that you hadn't really planned when you felt yourself compelled to investigate just how truthful to the historical record some of his artwork was. Um, you're not the first documentary filmmaker to change directions midstream, but I'm just wondering if that was a part of the process that was disconcerting for you, or if you could just describe what that felt like during those moments.
Sure. So this didn't start. This wasn't my initial direction, but um, some about you know after maybe a year of filming, I got the sense that there was a deeper story there, that a story about memory that I wanted to explore. Listening to Nathan's stories, some of them are so fantastical that you're not quite sure what to believe. and I wanted to take the viewer on that journey with me. I wasn't sure initially how much we'd be able to verify or not, um, but the research took us in some interesting directions, as you can see in the film. Um, yeah, it was definitely somewhat troubling when it came time to confronting Nathan about our findings. I didn't want to ruin the relationship that we had built, but I felt that it was important for the film to at least make an effort to see how he would react. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think it showed some interesting sides of him in terms of like his memory.
To me, it's a really interesting ethical question in that, as a filmmaker, you've got your obligations to your audience and you've got obligations to your subject. And it seems like there's a moment there in Nathan-ism where the two are kind of directly colliding. Can you take what he says and what he draws and what he writes at face value, or do you owe it to your audience as well to explore that? And I have to say, I really love how you handled that in the film. I'm the kind of viewer who can get really excited by the footage of your researcher in St. Louis going through the microfiche archives to try to verify whether or not Nathan was really where he said he was at the moment. So I just want to take you to that moment in the film where you do confront him and ask him that question. Can you describe what that was like? Just who was in the room with you and what was the mood or feeling like at that moment?
Um, it was just myself and two camera operator friends of mine. I mean, his apartment is relatively small, so we never had a very big crew with us. It definitely was the most tense day of filming. You know, I feel like for that period, Nathan felt, that I don't know if he felt a little betrayed in terms of our relationship. I'm glad to say that that feeling didn't last very long. By the next time that we visited him the following week, he was back to his normal self and was happy to continue our relationship, uh, you know, the way it had been. But that day was not an easy day for anybody in that room. It was even my camera operators, who didn't know Nathan quite as well as I did, were, you know, felt that it was a very tense experience.
I believe you entirely, and that really comes across on screen. This is your first full-length feature documentary, correct? Okay. Could you just talk a little bit about how some of your prior experience, whether it's academics, military, prior projects, help prepare you for making this film? And I'm interested actually in hearing about your editing experience specifically.
Sure. So interestingly enough, kind of my entrance into film work was through my experience serving in the Israeli army. Um, Part of my army service was making training videos for the Israeli army, and I think having the experience of being a young 18-year-old soldier, you know, I didn't have the experience of guarding top level Nazis, but I did have the experience of, you know, understanding duty at such a young age, and kind of I could sort of place myself into Nathan's shoes to sort of understand what he was going through. Um, and yeah, I after my army service, I studied film at NYU, where I focused mostly on editing work, and I've been working in New York as an editor, and I think my experiences as an editor have helped me learn how to find the story in the edit, because I didn't have a roadmap of where this story was going. So a lot of the film was found later on with digging through the 300 hours of footage that we had with Nathan, and just kind of piecing it together and seeing what structure could tell the story in the most intriguing way.
Wow. So you took 300 hours down to about 80 minutes. Thank you for doing that. I do have to say that the film is really, congratulations to you. Very, very impressively, very tautly edited. It tells its story really efficiently and emphatically. I've seen documentaries that don't do that, and I really appreciate the skill set that it takes to do that. I'm also interested in just the sometimes copious amount of research that goes into the process of making a documentary. So you found yourself obviously a handful of really wonderful interviewees here. You worked with archival footage and news items, military records, and more. Can you just talk a little bit about the work that a documentary filmmaker like yourself has to do that doesn't always involve pointing the camera at a subject?
Sure. I mean, it's funny, but after this project, I mean, I think uh, my wife comments on, you know, just how many books we now have about Nazi Germany, and like, we're a Jewish household with lots of books with swastikas on them, which uh, is was an interesting byproduct of working on this film. But yeah, there was a lot of, I knew the basics about the Nuremberg trials, but I had to immerse myself much deeper than that in order to tell as accurate a story, and to kind of piece together how much of Nathan's stories could have been true, uh, what he was may have conflated with stuff he had read, and stuff like that. Um, yeah, there are a lot of time spent in research that wasn't actually spent filming Nathan.
Well, I want to say thank you for doing that too, because I mean, and I know both that living in an era of some degree of Holocaust denialism is especially dangerous, and there are few people alive, I'm sure, who lived through the experience or the kind of experience anything close to what Nathan Helu did. So it's really important to keep stories and lives like his out there in the public eye, and for people to remember. And I hope to be able to learn from those experiences. Um, wanted to ask too about the animations, which are really quite striking. I enjoyed that aspect of the film a lot. I felt like they really helped bring Nathan's artwork to life. And I was just wondering if that was something that you had planned or imagined from the very beginning in your documentary, or if there were a moment where you decided it was a step that you wanted to take.
Um, from an early point in the process, I felt like I wanted to bring his artwork to life if possible, but it took a while until I found the right animator who I thought could do his work justice and make it seem as authentic as possible. And I came across this animator, Heloise Dorsan-Roche, who was actually based in Paris, but she had worked on a film that a colleague of mine had made, and something about her work had the sort of childlike innocence that I saw in a lot of Nathan's work, and I sent her a bunch of references from his work, and we did numerous tests to see how to make it feel like these were his works and not, you know, and not just animation that's somewhat reminiscent of his work. But almost every animation sequence in the film is based on specific drawings that she took uh, and brought to life in different ways.
They really are quite striking, and they do add, I think, a lovely element to the film. And I think they also seem to me, at least from the outside, to be really quite faithful to his own work, not taking it in too different a direction at all. But it's a lively and visually very interesting part of the film. So what's next for Nathan-ism in terms of distribution and exhibition? And then, of course, what's next for you?
Sure. We are sort of in the middle of the festival rollout for the film. We have several festivals coming up this fall. We will. Our next festival is at the Heartland Film Festival in Indianapolis. We'll be at Hot Springs in Arkansas. Um, we have a exciting New York premiere coming up that I can't officially publicize. But one of the most exciting things about our rollout, which I think would be very poignant for Nathan's legacy, is that in February of next year, we've been invited to screen the film in the courtroom in Nuremberg. Yes. So,
Wow, that is truly exciting. Congratulations to you on all the success of Nathanism so far. I sincerely hope that it meets and reaches the widest audience possible. It really is a lovely film. It's audacious in its own way, as is its subject, and it really deserves to be seen as much as possible. So, Elan, thank you again so much for visiting with us here at Film Obsessive.
of course, I'm glad you appreciate the film.